Many of you might recognize each other from protests or your virtual comrades who share the same posts on Instagram, or you debate Zionists on X, or have TikTok lives educating other people about the current situation. And others might have come together to phone bank in order to pressure their elected officials locally and nationally to call for a ceasefire or an arms embargo. Some from putting together classes for their children in the broader community. I myself put together a program last year called From Seeds to Roots, which brought together several mothers from the community because they wanted their 4-year-olds to get involved and educated from a young age. And they wanted to explain to them why we are bringing food to college campuses for our students that are sleeping outside in tents. And then we have our incredible youth who are creating Fortnite skins and islands and roadblocks protests and TikTok trends that are sporting the kufiya. And this is all because, according to my son, not my words, that's Sigma, bro. He also told me actually to add in that Israelis are betas. I have no idea what that means, but he said it would work in the speech, so there it is. So for the past 14 months, we've all engaged in something because we want to help our people in Gaza. And we've done even more over the years. As we all know, this did not start on October 7th, and neither did our activism in our community's engagement. But is our activism doing something? Are we being effective? Are the hours that we've spent, spent asking for ceasefire resolutions in our towns, in our cities, are they worth it? Are the phone calls and emails and petitions and social media campaigns, are they getting us any closer to a free Palestine? Is standing on Michigan Avenue, chanting in the freezing cold, or boycotting and telling others to? Are our efforts all in the right place? Tonight, Dr. Mohamad Abbasi will break down the types of activism that we have all engaged in and review whether or not they are effective uses of our time and where we should be focusing our efforts, inshallah. Dr. Mohamad Abbasi specializes in nonprofit management, organizational leadership, and personal development. After retiring from a successful career in business, he turned to consulting nonprofit organizations. He's helped nonprofits across the country with strategic planning, executive team development, fundraising, and board governance. His trainees include government officials, community leaders, and nonprofit executives. Dr. Abbasi earned a PhD in public administration, and his research interests focus on Muslim political participation. His most recent research analyzes the political participation of Muslims in the U.S. before and after the war on Gaza. Dr. Abbasi has taught various management courses at Rutgers University and the City University of New York. In addition, he has been a lecturer, a motivational speaker, and a fundraiser for over 35 years. He serves on boards of several nonprofit organizations. So please welcome Dr. Mohamad Abbasi.
Assalamu alaikum. How much time do I have? How are you all doing? I don't know about you, but I'm really worn out. I woke up before Fajr this morning, and it's been travel all day long. So if you're tired, like me, we're all forgiven. The topic that I'm going to talk about right now, there's a story behind it. You need to understand the story. First of all, I'm an engineer. I always leave that part out because a lot of people can't understand how does an engineer become a social scientist. It's almost like going from left brain to right brain thinking. I got bored of engineering way back 50 years ago almost, and I went into business. I built a successful business, and I realized at age 44 that I needed to be done so that I can get on with doing the real work that I really want to do. So I built a business, started it in 2000, January 1st, 2000, which right now boasts 10,000 associates, a real estate company, it's a big company, in 45 operations in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. The best thing about it is that it freed me up. So in 2010, I was free with absolutely nothing to do. I wake up in the morning and I had no idea what I'm going to do for the day. After so much fishing, I catch fish this big. After so much fishing and after trying golf is not for Palestinians. It didn't work for me. I tried different things. I finally said, let me help our nonprofit. So I went around the country I actually started in earnest in Milwaukee. And many of the brothers that I trained 20 years ago are here today. Salah Sarsour and all of these guys, they will tell you that I used to visit them 20 years ago. The question on my mind all along was this. Why is it that when we build businesses, we succeed at the highest level? I mean, my son is building a $30 million house for a Pakistani doctor who turned businessman who was making so much money that he needs elevators for his cars inside his house. You can imagine, a $30 million house. Why is it that we're so good when it comes to business, whether we open a small little bodega sometime in Philadelphia or whatever, or a big conglomerate, and when it comes to our Islamic work or our non-profit, even, it's not just Muslims, even non-Muslims, why do non-profits struggle? I couldn't understand. I went on the road trying to train, in other words, teach business practices to non-business people, to people who were trying to help their communities and so on. And at one point, a friend of mine, I was teaching leadership. A friend of mine gave me an article. It was called Leadership and Social Movement by Alden Morris, a professor at Tampa University. When I read it, I realized that there is so much more I needed to learn. At age 57, I went back to school. I got my master's in public administration. I got my PhD in public administration. 11 years of schooling at my age in order to find the answer, why are we failing so miserably? And again, I'm not beating ourselves up. I'm not a Muslim hater. I'm talking about nonprofits in general, but a subset of the nonprofits, there's 1.5 million of them in the US. And they're struggling, even though they're sitting on $500 billion in cash. There's over 100,000 foundations in the United States and 1.5 million nonprofits sitting on enormous amounts of cash, and many of them are failing in delivering their mission. So my journey, my schooling journey started with an itch to find out really some answers as to how can we help one another? How can I help our community? And what I'm going to share with you today is a short summary of my dissertation, which I defended about a year ago. It's in two phases. One that was defended, it was prior to October 7 data that I collected from around the country, a survey. And then after October 7, I ran the same questions again. And here I'm going to show you a comparison between what was going on in our community before October 7 and after October 7. What remained the same, what changed, what's good, what's bad, and what's ugly. It's going to make some of you feel uncomfortable. Sheikh Yasser Birjas, some of you know him, he's a protege of Amr Sulaiman, was sitting in the front seat when I presented it last time, and he was very uncomfortable with the results. And I pulled him aside and we sat down, we talked about it, and I explained to him what the results mean. So this presentation, I presented it in Sarajevo. There were 60 presentations before mine by intellectuals and scholars from all over the Muslim world, and mine was the final one. And the reason they put it at the end, because this attempts to answer the questions that make us feel uncomfortable. The question that the brother asked to the sister Nassar, I believe, that was here, about where are the MSA students, I'm going to answer that. The question that Abu Rashid asked in the previous, I was sitting, I heard them talk, the previous presentation when he talked about how we are not doing the work we're supposed to be doing, I'm going to answer that. So that's what I'm going to do. I am going to try to rush through it in 20 minutes so that I can allow for questions, okay? Now, if you're sitting here, you're lucky because you're going to see a screen. If you're over there, I'm going to have to try to verbalize very difficult regression tables, which I don't know how to do. If anybody knows regression tables, you'll know what I'm doing. So let's get started and see where that leads. So the topics that I'm going to cover today, the first one is distinguishing between civic and political. Is there a difference? Yes, there is. Second one is how do we train our community to effectively use our collective power? And I contend here that this is mainly the role of the masjid, and I'll defend that. The third, this is what AMP gave me. They told me to speak about these things. So the third thing is, how do we prioritize and strategize? The word strategize, I'm a strategic thinker. I'm usually like 20 years ahead of my comrades when it comes to thinking. So how do we strategize to effectuate change? I believe that's the role of Muslim nonprofits. So these are the three things that I'm going to cover today. The research question is very simple. This is the question that was the foundation for the research, for the dissertation. How do Muslim young adults, I wanted to compare the youth with the adults. Now, why do you want to do that? Well, I'll tell you what. Does anybody know what percentage of our Muslim community in America are young? And I define young as under 41. That's the same definition by Pew Research, okay? Under 41. What do you think? How many? Take a guess. 63% of our community are under 41. Now, this may mean or may not mean anything to you until you know that the average within the American society is the percentage of under 41 in the general population is 38%. So we are a very, very young community. And all the research that I saw, believe me, I went through hundreds of pieces of research, especially since 2001. All the research on the Muslim community going back 20, 25 years does not look at the youth, it looks at the adults. The youth the majority of our community are totally ignored. It's like they don't even exist. So that's the research question. So the dissertation is the first part, which is what are the young people doing, basically. And then the second part is, did anything change after October 7th? Now again, one of the reasons why I focus on the youth is because the youth are our major resource. You see, as a strategic planner, I always look at resources. Whether it's a business, a company, an organization, you have to identify your resources. What are you working with? And usually, you hear people saying, using the term capacity building. An organization has capacity, it doesn't have capacity. An organization needs capacity building. That's usually a recommendation we make to organizations. What does that mean? It means they need leadership development, they need human resources, and they need financial resources. Those are the three things that you need. If you are missing one of them, you cannot even have a strategic plan. You have to work on these three, and when you take care of these three, then let's talk strategically. For now, you're stuck. You have a problem. You're like a car running on 3 tires or 2 tires instead of 4. So that's basically that's the research question. Young meaning 18 to 41. Okay? I broke it into three age groups: 18 to 25, 25 to 31, and 31 to 41, and then anybody over 41. So this is the boring part. I'm going to go quickly. The data, look at the bottom. I had 935 responses, and here I want to publicly thank AMP, because AMP shared my survey with its listserv, and I got the highest response from around the country from AMP participants. There's no way for me to identify that, but I give them a big hand. Thank you, AMP. Thank you, Salah. Thank you. My dissertation committee, there was a Chinese professor. She said, Mohamad. I said, what? She said, how do you get 900 people to take your survey? I said, excuse me? She said, how do you get that many people to take your survey? Did you pay them money? I said, I'm rich, but I'm not that rich. She's like, how do you do that? I said, well, I served this community for 35 years, never asked for a penny. And when I needed them, and I said, could you thank you? No, please. It's all عند Allah Azza wa Jal. Really, all we do is hope that Allah accepts. So I did all of that. And then one day I showed up and I said, hey, brothers, like the heads of 17 organizations, basically. I sent them an email, including Salah. And I said, can you please share this with your listserv? Next thing I know, literally hundreds of people taking the survey. And it's like, wow. In 2 weeks, I had 935 people take the survey. And it's national. I can tell it's coming from all over the country. I can't tell who the individual is, but I know the region where they're coming from. So the bottom line is, the first survey was 935, which is 3 times more than what I needed. Anybody who understands surveying knows for a population of over 1 million, 387, the math calculations, you need 387 respondents, and that would be sufficient for research, okay? The number I got is 3 times that. So after October 7, I defended based on the first survey. I presented it. Anybody attended my presentation last year? Okay, so there were a few of you. I presented it here. And then it dawned on me, October 7 changed a lot of things, changed a lot of people. So why don't we find out? So I went back to the same people. And I said, can you run the survey again? They said, we just did that. I said, just do it again. So they ran it again. And within 1 week, I had 571. So I analyzed that. And today, this is the second audience that's going to see this presentation. I only presented it in Sarajevo, and I'm presenting it here today. You're going to see what happened before and after October 7. Who changed, who didn't, and what we need to pay attention to. So if we cover that, would that be worth your time tonight? Say yes. Yes, good. I'm just checking to see that you're awake. Okay, so here we have to define 2 terms. Okay? Political participation and civic engagement. Political participation, you don't have to see the screen. Listen to me. It's choosing who sits in office or what they do when they're in office. Can I make it simpler than that? It can't be made. So that's political participation. Now, a lot of people in our community think political participation is voting. That's a small part of it. We teach a course in political participation that has 12 different ways to participate in government. 12. One of them is voting. There's 11 other ones. There's no time to go over them. So political participation is choosing who sits in office. Would you like to guess how many governments are there in the United States? Take a guess. Now, a lot of people think 1. What do you say, 10? 10, okay. Any other guesses? Well, okay, that's good. Another guess? 50? Well, 50 states and 1 federal, so that would be 51, right? Yes. The answer is going to floor you. There's 87,000 governments in America. Yes. There is 87,000 governments. 1 federal, 50 state, and then you have counties, you have towns, you have cities, you have boroughs, you have school districts, you have MUA, municipal utilities, water authority districts. Those are governments. And they are all run by elections. Who's electing these people? How would you elect them if you don't know who they are? You see, this is what Abu Shayd was talking about earlier. It's almost like we're not in this country. If you don't know that there's 87,000 governments, how are you going to vote for them? You have to know that they exist first. I'm not here to beat you over the head. You know, you're the good guys. You're here. You're listening. You're learning. I'm talking about the 99.9% out there who have no clue what we're talking about. Anyway, let me take off my jacket. It's too hot. So political participation is picking public officials or influencing what they do. So even if you never vote, Allah يجعلك لا تصوت. If somebody says, يا أخي حرام التصويت ومش عارف بقول له بتصوتش دخيل الله. But how about, I said this in خطبة الجمعة last week. I said to the people, listen to me. How would you like for your daughter to be standing in the bathroom next to a guy who calls himself a girl? How do you feel about that? So what does this have to do with voting? Well, the people that make that decision have been voted into office. At the same time, you were saying it's haram to vote. And they scratch their head like, they have no idea that school boards are voted into office. And that sometimes they win by a single vote. Wallahi, one guy in New Jersey, in Teaneck, lost, his name something Rasool. You can look him up. He lost the election by a single vote. Sam Rasool. Okay? I'm telling you real stories. George Bush won by 537 votes back in 2020. Those of old-timers remember those days. Anyway, yeah, 2000. So these are the questions that I used to build the political participation index. I basically asked 11 questions. Later on, I dropped 3 of them. They were, anyway, I don't want to teach statistics. So based on 8 questions, if you checked off, for instance, 6 of them, you probably qualified as a political activist. If you checked off 1, you didn't. So there was an index, okay? And it went from 0 to 8, right? So that's the political participation. If anybody wants to know those questions, here they are. It basically has to do with you doing material support for a public official. Either donating money, knocking on doors on their behalf, all of these things, okay? Contacted them, contributed money, volunteered for them, and so on and so forth. That's called political participation. Now, civic engagement. What drives me crazy is when our community holds classes to teach people civic engagement, and I'm like, no, we don't want to teach them civic engagement. We want to teach them political participation. Civic engagement simply defined as doing good things in your neighborhood. And you know what people say about people like that? They say they're useful idiots. I'm not joking. The Dallas Morning News, when was asked, you guys were okay with Muslims when like the Oklahoma City bombing took place and 200 people from Dallas went there to help out with the relief effort and all of that. Why all of a sudden now you're calling them terrorists? They're like, well, they're useful idiots. That's what they call us. Okay? I'm not against feeding the hungry. I'm not against volunteering in hospitals. I'm not against civic engagement. But to replace political participation with civic engagement, that's the main reason why we're failing. We are climbing a high ladder, leaning against the wrong wall. Do you understand what's going on here? Our activism is in the wrong direction. I'm going to prove everything because I'm making huge claims right now. And some of you are scratching your head and saying, well, this guy has some guts to say these things. Well, wait. So civic engagement is doing good things in the neighborhood. Really. And it's in the Quran. يطعمون الطعام على حبه مسكينا ويتيما واسيرا. They feed the hungry. They do all these things. We Muslims love to do that, right? So that's civic engagement. And these are the questions. No time to go over them. Then there's political voice. Political voice is what we do best. Screaming, shouting, protests, wah, wah, wah. I've been in protests as far back. The sister was talking about student activism. The first demonstration I attended in New York City, it was 1976. There was 500,000 celebrating the birth of the apartheid state on 5th Avenue, and we were a couple of hundred of us students demonstrating on 6th Avenue, okay? And we were louder than they were. So yes, we've been doing it for 50 years in this country. But has it ever really resulted in anything? I leave the answer to you. I mean, my daughter, she's sitting there with my grandson, my granddaughters. They attended the biggest demonstration in New York City, in Washington. It was estimated that 400,000 people attended. Did that stop the carnage? Did that stop the onslaught? Did that stop the genocide? I leave the answer to you. It's 420 days, and it's still going. So political voice has to do with expressing, these are the questions, expressing your just going out there shouting and screaming and so on, which is good, but, and don't stop doing it. But here, remember, I'm comparing. So, the focus here is going to be on how these independent variables, 13 of them, influence political participation or civic engagement. And what are these 13 things? These are called the independent variables. The main one was age. My dissertation is about age. Are the young people different from their parents? That was really the basic question. But you cannot do that alone. You have to introduce control variables, they're called, and other independent variables. So I looked at things like gender, male, female, and there's been a lot of literature on this, by the way. Marital status, ethnicity, religious sect, education. Education is a big one. Religiosity, you know, how often do you pray? Organizational encouragement, whether you have been recruited by an organization like MAS, ICNA, AMP, whatever. And then whether your organization offers classes and training on how to be active. Your masjid. Do you belong to a masjid that actually recruits people? I mean, we have in New York a masjid called Al Falah. They actually go in the street and they grab you and they bring you to the masjid to pray. They usually follow the Tablighi school of thought. So that's out there. So if you belong to them, you checked high on this one. The next one is, does your masjid provide classes and training and so on? And then there is partisanship. Are you a Democrat, Republican, Independent, or ideology? Are you left, center, or right winger? Okay. So these are the independent variables. Now, I use regression analysis. I'm not going to explain to you what regression analysis is. However, in regression analysis, when you look at a variable, it holds all other variables constant. In other words, it excludes the influence of the others. If we're looking at age, everything else is equal. So we're just looking at age here. If we're looking at sect, if we're looking at ethnicity, then it's just ethnicity. Everything else is held constant. That's the premise, or that's what the regression analysis does. This is not regression analysis. This is called cross-tabulation. It detects a relationship between one thing and the other. So here's what it shows. It shows that before October 7, 44% of Muslims did absolutely nothing. They're not activists in any shape, way, or form. After October 7, it dropped to 38%. Takbir. Okay, it means, you know, we're motivated now. We're doing something. The general population, according to Keter, this is the guy that was running Pew Research. He's a big, big name in social science. He did a study of 15,000 young Americans back in 2002, and his study is the one that motivated me, because he separated political from civic, from voice, from all of these things. Before that, everybody was conflating all of them like if they were all the same. So Keter found that 48% of Americans don't qualify as civic activists, political activists, or any activist at all. 48%. Political activists, those who qualify as political activists in the Muslim community, were only 9% before October 7. After October 7, that went up to 17%, almost double. Okay? In the general population, it's 20%. Civic activists, wow, mashallah, takbir. Look, 30% of our Muslim brothers and sisters, on average, qualify as civic activists. They do stuff in their neighborhood. They're nice people. They go to hospitals, they volunteer, they feed the hungry, they do all of these things, which our faith says you should do. But when you compare it to political activism, look at the ratio, 30 to 9. Okay? After October 7, that dropped to 22%. That's actually a very good sign. Okay? And then dual activists, these people that do both, before October 7, it was 17%. Now it's 22%. And the general population is 16%. The observations on the left side is almost 900. And that's a huge, robust sample from all over the country. The second one is 501. So this is just going over the data to see if there's any relationship between one and the other. Now let's dig a little deeper. If you're sitting there, you have no idea what we're talking about. So I'll have to explain it to you. What I did is I look at the last two columns. Before October 7, the ratio of civic activists to political activists among the religious. Let's look at the religious, the most religious. Forget about religious. Look at the one below it. The people that pray 5 times a day. The ratio of their civic activism to political activism among the most religious who pray 5 times a day before October 7 was 8 to 1. 8 to 1. This should make us scratch our head. After October 7, look what happened. It dropped to 3.5. The best improvement, scroll down, go all the way down to females. You see the sisters down there? Before October 7, it was 5-1. 5 civic activists, 5 ratio 5-1. Look at after October 7. It's 1.5. All right? Now let's go to the next table. This will blow your mind. Look all the way at the bottom. Look at people that say, I don't pray at all. They're not religious at all. The I don't know at all, their civic activism and political activism are the same. It's like the general population. After October 7, there's no civic activism. These guys are only doing the political work. How do you explain that? And I pose this to leaders of the Muslim community, not here, internationally. This is science. You can't argue with that. And I'm going to give you more data. I'm just going over the highlights basically. So here somebody would say, okay, what's wrong with that? Okay, for those of you who know the Quran, ayah 19 in chapter 9, Surah At-Tawbah. أجعلتم سقاية الحج وعمارة المسجد الحرام كمن آمن بالله واليوم الآخر وجاهد في سبيل الله لا يستوون عند الله والله لا يهدي القوم الفاسقين. This ayah, والله لا يهدي القوم الظالمين. استغفر الله. When you see this ayah, مناسبة النزول, it is said that Al-Abbas and Talha were having an argument, and each one of them was showing off what they do. We take care of the pilgrims when they come, we give them water, we give them food, no, we do this, no, we do that. The ayah supposedly came down and says, civic activism, modern day translation, you can quote me on it, and I'll bear this burden in the front of Allah on the day of judgment. Modern day translation of this, civic activism is not equal to political activism. They are not the same. I contend and go one step further. And I say that political activism, civic activism, is the biggest obstacle in the way of political activism. It gives us a moral license to not do the work we should be doing. Let that sink in. The question that the brother asked the sister, the last question, where are the MSA students? Where are they? I've been on campuses. From Harvard to Rutgers to NJIT, I went around. They were nowhere to be seen. What's going on here? Now, for my dissertation, I had to answer that. And I'm going to share with you what my theory is. Because after all, it's all theory. Unless we dig deeper and we find more data and we probe these brothers and sisters to find out why are they doing this and not that, it's just a theory. And it was enough to give me a PhD, but if you're not convinced, I can understand. So let's move on. This is a little harder to read, but I'll explain to you what it says. This is a regression table. This is real science, okay? This shows that before October 7, the first 4 columns, there was a difference between the young and the old. The coefficient there on the extreme left, what you see there, the 30% coefficient, what that says is every age group you go up in age from 18 to 25, from 25 to 31, every time you move one step up, the political activism increases by 30%. 30%, 30%, 30% until you reach the adults. Okay? And I had to explain that. But that's not the most important part. The most important part, look at what happened after October 7. The statistical significance, which is 3-star in the first group of data, all but disappeared. You see that? Translated into plain English. There was a difference between the adults and the youth before October 7. After October 7, we're all in it together. There's no difference between old and young. Everybody is in. If everybody is active now. Okay? So that's a good sign. Let's take another one. South Asians, our Pakistani and Indian and Bengali brothers. Before October 7, Their political activism is 55% behind the baseline, which is the Arabs. This is science, guys. And by the way, I have 4 Desi grandchildren. So I don't want anybody to think that I'm beating up on our Pakistani brothers. My daughter is married to a Pakistani, and I have 4 beautiful Pakistani grandchildren. So I love my Pakistani brothers. I've given khutbah 35 years straight in a Pakistani masjid. And they were the first ones to see this. So their political activism is 55% behind the Arabs, as you see in the first column. What happened after October 7? Take a look. It's in front of you. What happened? It's gone. I attribute that to the activism of the South Asian sisters. The sisters are on fire. I see it with my own eyes. They are up front in every demonstration, in every protest. They are on fire, okay? But regardless, when you look at it as an ethnicity, that difference, the minus 55 disappeared. It became 28. But look at across, are there any stars? If you don't see those stars, it means there's no statistical significance. In other words, it's like there's no difference. The numbers don't mean anything. There's no difference. The stars tell you if it's real or not. Let's go down. The one highlighted in yellow. People who pray 5 times a day. This is the real shock. This is the one that really shocked people like Yasser Burjas and all of these mashayikh. Look at what you see there. People who pray 5 times a day. Their political participation is 57% behind the people who pray daily, but they lose one, they miss one here and there. And those people are 27% behind those who who pray Eid and Jum'ah. And those people, you see what I'm saying? Like people who don't pray at all are actually better than people who pray every once in a while. And those are better than people who pray daily. And those are much better in political participation than people who pray 5 times. Wow. Okay, so let's see what happened on October 7. Look at what happened. Okay, I'll wrap it up. And what happened after October 7? They got worse. They're hiding. And you're serious? Look, it's minus 90, minus 0.9. And look at the stars. It's statistically significant. Now, so that you don't think I'm beating up on people of faith, because I'm one of them, I want you to look at just one more. You see that one says organizational encouragement, the one below that prays 5 times a day? These are people that belong to organizations like MAS, ICNA, AMP, and people like that. They're religious, but they're organized. Okay? These are the most consistent people in the entire population. Takbir. That's the good news. Because again, I'm not here to destroy our community. I'm here to show where the good is so we can invest in it, so we can do something more. So here it shows that the people who are part of an organization, their political activism is 120% more than the ones who are not. And if you go across, the t-value, you see that number 8.26? That is the size of the effect. The effect has to be 2 or higher. That's a number. To most of you, it doesn't mean anything. 8 is the biggest one in the entire regression table, which means it's a huge effect, and it's statistically significant. It's got 2 stars, it's got 3 stars, and here's the best part. You go across, it's consistent, it's 1.11. And as you go across, you'll see it's 5.04 and it's 3-star again. So it's not all that bad. It just says that within the religious Muslim population, those who are organized are actually consistently producing politically and civically, as you will see in a moment. Okay? So that's the good news. Let's move on. I could talk about civic engagement. As you can see here, the people who are religious, they're very consistent. Before October 7, after October 7, mashallah, their civic activism is off the roof. And it's a good thing. But it's coming at the expense of political participation. That's what this study shows, okay? So let's wrap up. Before October 7, forget about October 7. Young Muslims' participation is lower than their parents. It doesn't make any sense. Among Latinos, the youth are actually more active than their parents. So I dug deeper and I looked at the research. Turns out, in the Muslim community, In the Muslim community, 63% come to America with degrees. They're already engineers and doctors. Okay, what's the big deal? Among the Latinos, 26%. So in a Latino household, the child is more educated than the father and the mother. So they are more politically active. I looked at 3 different studies from San Antonio, from Chicago, from 3 different cities. Among the Latinos, the youth are much more active than their parents. In the Muslim community, it's the other way around. Not because our kids are bad, it's because our adults hit the floor running. Yeah. Okay, so here we need to pat ourselves on the back that we came to this country with degrees, we're smart, we know what we should do. So that explains why the parents are much more politically active than their kids within the Muslim community. It's not that our kids are bad. Actually, their participation is higher than the youth in the general population and in the Latino community. Okay, and the numbers are here. It's actually 53% versus 32%. Okay, so our kids are fine. It's just that they're not as good as their parents. So the parents here, give yourselves a round of applause. Yeah, takbir. Okay, so there is explanations why the religious people are not politically active. One explanation is it has to do with mobilization theory. The adults are recruited into organizations that teach political activism, that actually the baseline is you have to be active. The youth are not in that population because they're young. Nobody goes around recruiting the youth to sit in a halaqah. You know, you wait for them to grow up. Back home, we were organized when we were 15. In this country here, they reach 21, 23, 24, and we're still haram. دير بالك علي. بلاش تزعلوا. بلاش توري صور in Palestine. Don't show them pictures. بلاش تحرق كلبه يا حرام. I mean, all this nonsense going on about like handling our kids with kids' gloves. Enough of this garbage. Okay, so, no, seriously. Let them grow up, for God's sake. Let them grow up. Young people do not usually belong to anything. The second explanation, the masjid. This one, I think I'm going to almost conclude this one because I still have, she scares me. Okay, let's look at political explanation number 2, the masjid. Without looking there, here's the story. 95% of Muslim kids in America go to public schools. About 5% go to the 275 Muslim schools, okay? So yay, great. The ones that go to public schools on the weekend, they go sit in front of a sheikh or a muhaffid. Jazallah khair. Except this guy just came from Pakistan or Silwan or whatever, and he was told back home that politics is bad. It's for the bad people. Okay, so they sit there and the kid says, I want to go vote. And they say, vote what? Haram. Okay, so this kid is being taught by somebody who is totally disconnected from the board that governs the organization. There's no conversation going on. These guys, as you can see in a moment, they're volunteers. They don't have time. They are worried about raising millions of dollars to pay the bills and to fund the expansion and this and that. Do you think they actually bring the volunteer who sits with their kids, teaching them Al-Fatiha and Quran on Sunday, and say to them, so what do you think about the political climate in this country? You think we should be telling our kids to vote for Trump or for... do you think that this conversation is taking place? No, absolutely not. And I believe that's one of the explanations why the kids that are growing up in the public schools. Now, Ihsan Bagby has been doing a study since like more than 20 years ago. His last study came out in 21. And he says in it, 76% of our 3,000 masjids are run by volunteers. 76%. Only 12% have the proper management structure. This is what I've been training on for the past 20 years. That they need to have a 3-level governance with a board, an executive team, an executive director. Only 12% are doing that. And then you go all the way at the bottom, and he concludes. These are his words, not mine. Look at what he says. He says the dependence on volunteers to run mosques is a major impediment to mosque development. Okay, that's a Bagby. One more. Haddad and Loomis. Haddad wrote more books about, she's Christian, about Muslims and Islam in America than anybody else alive. She's been writing about Islam in America for 60 years. She's a Lebanese Christian. Yvonne Haddad, okay, I think Georgetown University. In 1984, she did a survey of the 550 masjids in America, together with Loomis. She basically, she writes in her book, the book is out there, you can buy it from Amazon. She says, there's no leadership training institutions. These guys have no idea what they're doing. She's talking about the leaders of our masajid. That's even back in 1987. Okay? So you'd probably say, oh, she's a Muslim hater. Okay, let's go to the next slide. Lester Solomon. This is the biggest name in non-profit management probably alive. He's still alive. In 87, he said non-profits. He wasn't talking about Muslims. He was talking about non-profits in general. The 1.5 million of them out there. Here's what he said. He said they suffer from 3 maladies, 3 big impediments, problems. Number 1, here it is, amateurism. They are run by amateurs. What do you mean amateurs? MashaAllah, هذا دكتور وهذا مهندس. And this guy is general manager. Yeah, but none of them ever took a course in management. Okay? People running multi-million-dollar budgets. I'm not bashing our masjid leaders because I'm one of them. I'm just saying there's more to be desired. You find somebody sitting on a board of a masjid with a $2 or $3 million budget, he can't balance his checkbook at home. How could that be? But that's number 1. Number 2, particularism. You know what that means? Narrow focus. And I used to beat up on the masajid until one day I realized they're actually fulfilling their mission. What's their mission? افتح الابواب خلي الناس تصلي. Let people find a place to pray. In Ramadan, do tarawih. And then on Jum'ah, do Jum'ah. Jazakum Allah khair. What else is there to ask them for? That's their mission. That's particularism. The masjid is not designed like Masjid al-Rasul to be the seat of government. It's designed as a house of, just like a church, just like a synagogue. Actually, in the Arab countries, it's worse. Between Salah and Salah, they lock the door. I went to the masjid where I grew up when I was a kid to pray recently in a visit. It was locked. I said, what happened? They said, oh, fish Salah. Oh, okay. Now I understand. How dare I think that the masjid is open other than waqt al-Salah. And then the next one is paternalism. 50% of our community is totally disabled. Our sisters are our biggest resource, and they are not utilized. And it's not just the Muslim community, even in the general population. People think women don't know how to do things. My company that I was telling you about that has 10,000 people was built by my wife and my daughter. They're sitting back in the room. Okay? And I don't patronize them. I don't need nothing from them. Okay? But the truth is, our sisters, our mothers, our wives have tremendous energy that's underutilized because of cultural factors or God knows what. And the last one is insufficiency. They're always, دائما بيشحدوا subhanallah. They're always looking for money. Okay. This is going to require another meeting. I don't know if we have time for it. Can I borrow 5 minutes and I'll wrap up very quickly? Can you guys handle 5 minutes? So I just answered the first mandate, which was to explain the difference between political and civic, and I think you got the idea that I hate civic participation. I don't hate it, I just think that it's taking us away from the real work that we need to be doing. That's the bottom line. Now, okay, what would our organizations do? Let's look at 2 kinds of organizations. There is business on the left side. Those of you who studied business, MBAs in the room and so on, PODS GRUB it's called, the first initial of each one of these words, which is planning, organizing, directing, staffing, and all these things. On the right side, this is the paper that sent me back to school. You see stuff that is almost like what we learned from the Seerah about the Prophet ﷺ and his Sahaba. And okay, leadership in social movement is about inspiring people. It's about having a big mission. It's about having, thinking strategically. It's about all these things. Our organizations need to be somewhere in between. They are not exactly social movements because they are structured. Social movements are very fluid usually, and they usually don't have very clear leadership, very clear structure, and so on. It's just a whole bunch of people, working together. Organizations are very rigid and very well structured, and there's somebody on the top, like our orange president, who says, you're fired, and you're fired. And basically, it's governing by fiat, which means power, right? And force. So we need to learn how to operate in between these two. And I don't see that anywhere, okay? This is what an organizations look like. So a lot of people get scared when they see that. We teach a course in public management, and we go over each one of these. Each one of these is like 1 or 2 chapters. We built our company using a much simpler model, which is basically the ownership of the organization or the board, bringing an executive leader who then hires an operations manager to serve the people with some kind of leadership council, advisory council. We use this model to build a company that right now has 188,000 people worldwide. I was there on the floor when we had only 5,000 people. And I was part of the team that took it from 5,000 to 55,000 in 5 years, using this simple model. I started teaching this 24 years ago, right here in Chicago and in Milwaukee. You were there. Salah was there. They were all there. And people, they didn't get it. So let me conclude by saying this. If we are going to really fix ourselves, we need a new organization. We need a new organization that is franchised. We need to build a prototype in one place. Okay, let me make it simple for you. I suggested this 20 years ago, and it was basically supposed to be a Muslim APAC. I have my notes. I can show you the notes. I suggested that 20 years ago using this model. You basically need to build a model in one city, perfect it, have about 100 people in it under local leadership, and then you take that and you copy it 500 times. You're probably going to say 500 is a lot. No, it's not. We have 3,000 masjid. For every 6 masjid, you need to have 1 chapter. If you look at it that way, can't you get 100 people from 6 masajid? By golly, of course you can. Okay, what would happen then? It's going to be a membership organization. Every member is going to pay about $100. So that amounts to $60 million a year. Can you think of a couple of things we can do with $60 million? Osama Bushid was complaining why we couldn't support Bowman and we can't Corey Bush and all these people. It's because we don't have an organization like the one I just described. And I've been calling for our community to do that for 20 years. I'm not getting any younger. I'm not going to wait for permission from anybody. I'm launching it in New Jersey, probably within the next month. And the next chapter will probably be in Milwaukee. Stay tuned. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Thank you, Dr. Mohamad. So our takeaway from tonight, political participation cannot be replaced with civic engagement. And that those within our community who are part of organizations like AMP are, alhamdulillah, are very politically engaged. And so that we need to focus our efforts more on these political activism. And that includes things like Dr. Abu Rashid said about putting our money into political campaigns for those who can be behind our communities. And inshallah, they can, and also calling on our public officials to uphold their promises that they've made to our communities, calling and voicing our opinions to the White House. All those are politically, can we call them political participation, those things, inshallah? And starting a Muslim APAC under Amma's leadership, inshallah. That's the last one, inshallah. Stay tuned, everybody. Thank you. Jazakumullah khair. But before we end, we just want to wrap up really quickly. Just an hour ago, Jinan told us that every single person here must be activated in order for us to reach our goal of a free Palestine. And depending on your skills, your resources, your tools, every one of us must do something in the fight for our homeland. There is no separating ourselves from activism as citizens living in the most complicit entity in this genocide. And as you just heard, we cannot just vote and think that we have done our duty. If there is anything for us to take away from all of our speakers from tonight, is to keep pushing elected officials, because political activism is not just civic. We need to call for local ceasefire resolutions. We need to demand that we defund the occupation, demand an arms embargo, and hold companies accountable. And that political activism, boycotting, protesting, continue doing all of these things. And continue to talk about Palestine. They all complement each other, as Aya told us earlier, and they all go hand in hand, and we must continue to actively engage in all of them. So thank you all for participating in today.